Welcome to our panel discussion tonight. My name is Kendra Bradley, and I am the Executive Director of Quaker House. I am going to share my screen with you for just a moment. So Quaker House is a nonprofit organization, and part of our mission is the counseling and support to service members who are questioning their role in the military. This all began 52 years ago in 1969 during the Vietnam War. Dean Holland was a soldier stationed at Fort Bragg here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and he knew that he was a conscientious objector, but he was having difficulty getting his application for discharge processed and approved. So he hitchhiked about 72 miles to Chapel Hill, where the closest Quaker meeting was, and asked them for help. And that is how Quaker House's story got started. Ever since that time, we have been actively involved in helping conscientious objectors, both educating young people about what it is and also helping people who are already in the military and who are trying to apply to get out. One of the ways that we do this is through our participation in the GI Rights Network and Hotline. This network has counselors stationed throughout the United States, and they take phone calls from service members no matter where they're stationed throughout the world. Two of those counselors are Steve Wolford and Lenore Yarger, and they have been doing this work for 20 years. They are skillful, dedicated, compassionate. They're just simply amazing. And it's my honor to be able to work with them. Equally amazing are our 5 panelists that you will be able to hear from tonight. It takes an amazing amount of self-reflection and courage and perseverance to go through the conscientious objector discharge process with the military. We have an amazing tech host tonight. As you probably have learned over the past year, like so many of us, it goes a lot more smoothly if you have a tech host in the background. So that is Bill O'Connor, and he is a member of the Quaker House board, has been for many years, and has served in many of the officer roles on the board. And we just simply could not do this without him. So without further ado, I turn the time over to Steve and Lenore.
Hello, everybody. I'm the Steve of Steve and Lenore. And I just want to start and say a little bit about the idea behind this panel. And part of that is, so on this webinar tonight, there are a whole bunch of people who have followed our work and supported our work for years. And they've heard us talk a lot about conscientious objection, but they've never got a chance. We're on the phone with people, working this out and helping them with the process and everything like that. But a lot of people have never had a chance to meet anyone, and all they've ever gotten is kind of our reports. Oh, there's this really neat person here who's doing this thing or something. So this is a chance in part, for them to connect with real people and real stories that make conscientious objection kind of real and visible. And I think all the conscientious objectors we work with are great, but I will say that this particular panel is a very special group that made it really easy to imagine people connecting with them, because I think you're going to see they're great people, and they have really good stories. I think you're going to be impressed with them. So that's kind of what brought us here. These 5 are not the only conscientious objectors that we're working with. We actually have a lot of people, and they'll probably talk some about this process. It's a long process, and people are in different stages. So in terms of that, just to give you a range, this week, we have already heard from 2 other conscientious objectors from the Marine Corps, both who said they have finally been approved and they're out of the military. One was Monday and one was Tuesday. At the same time, yesterday, I started a conversation with a person in the National Guard who said he's had a spiritual awakening, and he found out about conscientious objection. He's starting this process off from square one. So there's always a wider group of people, but I think this panel just will give everybody a really good sense of, what some of the people are like who do this and what their stories look like.
Hi, I'm Lenore. Most of the people who call us about conscientious objection on the hotline already have at least some idea of what the process entails. People are very tech savvy these days, and a lot of folks have read a little bit about it on the internet. Not everyone, but many. So I wanted to just give you what our first job is, to kind of explain the process to them. And I wanted to give our viewers an idea of that process to put in context these stories that you're about to hear. When someone decides they want to apply for conscientious objection, they have to submit a written application to their chain of command. And that application, most of it's really straightforward, but the heart of it is a series of essay questions that are asking, what's the nature of your belief that makes you a conscientious objector? How have your beliefs changed since you joined the military? And how your beliefs are reflected in your day-to-day living. And so one of our jobs is to turn into that nightmare high school English teacher who asks our applicants to revise over and over and over again their answers to these questions, so that they can turn in a really strong written statement and tell their story in a really full and complete way. And each one of these people that you're going to hear from tonight has gone through that process and done a stellar job putting together their stories. And when they turn in that written application, they then get interviewed by a chaplain, by a mental health counselor, and by an investigating officer who we call the IO. And the IO then makes a recommendation. They gather all that evidence, and based on their interview with the applicant, they submit a recommendation for or against this person being approved as a conscientious objector. And at that point, we can help write a rebuttal if necessary to what the IO has recommended, or if there's anything in the record that needs to be clarified. And then after that, it gets submitted up the chain of command. It goes through legal, and then it goes up the chain of command. And that's when the waiting begins. And first, it can take, on average, I would say about a year for that whole process to go through until conclusion. Some of the people get approved sooner, some later, and you'll hear some variance on that timeline tonight in these stories. While the process is in place, while that application is pending, the applicant is supposed to be assigned to jobs that conflict as little as possible with their stated values. So most of the time, nobody is using weapons. They're not training with weapons. They're put in some kind of non-combatant job. Often they're not asked to go on deployments, but that can happen. But a lot of times we have success in holding people back from deployments. And the final decision authority on this is each secretary of each branch of the military has a review board that reviews conscientious objection applications and makes the final decision. So that's the background for tonight's stories. I just want to remind people, if you do have questions about anything you're hearing or things that you're not hearing, please write them in the Q&A. And with that, I want to introduce our first panelist, Christopher Miller. He is stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He was in training at to be a special forces soldier when he contacted us, and he submitted his application in October of 2019. Chris?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad you all took time out of your day to listen to us. My name is Chris Miller, if you didn't catch that already. And I grew up in Vermillion, South Dakota in a military family. And from a young age, all I wanted to do was be a soldier. So when I first enlisted, I enlisted when I was 18 in the fall of 2013. And my first experience at basic training was unpleasant. I did not really fit in, and I was discharged for failure to adapt, is what the discharge said. That did not faze me like it should have, unfortunately. And so in the winter of 2017, I re-enlisted, went back to infantry basic, and I graduated. And then I got sent to a unit in Georgia. Being there, it did not make me happy like I thought it would. In fact, I was quite uncomfortable being there. And I attributed this to taking issue with how the unit was run and the people that comprised it. I wanted more, so that led me to seek joining the Special Forces, or the Green Berets, as you might have also heard them be called. And I chose that because my father was one. And then not even a year after graduating basic, in the late spring of 2016, I went to Special Forces Assessment and Selection, which is 3 weeks of just brutal physical endurance. You just tough it out and it sucks. And somehow I was picked up and I was selected to be trained as a medical sergeant. While that news briefly excited me, going back to the day-to-day again, that unpleasantness was still there. So I started Special Forces qualification course in the spring of 2017, and I began with 9 months of medical training in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It was exciting to be at the schoolhouse because I was learning how to heal people. And my enthusiasm for medicine made it easy to look over the faults of the people I was training with. A few displayed genuine distaste for medicine, and they were more eager to go out, and the phrase a lot of people use is stack bodies. And something wonderful though happened at the end of that 9 months of training is that, and it later would impact me, and you'll hear, I met my future wife, Pam, and we began dating in the winter of 2018. That summer, in the middle of us starting to date, I was sent to Squad Unit Tactics, which is a 6-week course where I was taught how to conduct unconventional warfare. More specifically, I was taught how to murder other people with precision and brutality. There's kinder ways of saying it, but that's the truth. An important event occurred here that kind of primed me for the months ahead. I was being graded on my leadership during an ambush. It was my job to ensure that the squad got to the right location at the right time before the convoy passed, and this was all in training. And we did that, we got it in place, and then finally the convoy came, and I signaled for the attack to commence, and it's the mad minutes is what it's called in the woods, and it's just this loud, thunderous eruption of noise. You hear the thunder of machine guns and the pops of small arms fire. And then there's a silence afterwards, and the point of that silence is to hear anybody still moving, so you can shoot them. So I signaled my men to advance, and at this time, some actors portraying the opposition came out from behind the vehicle, and one was being held as a hostage. And we're told to take everything at face value, so I took it at face value. I said, okay, this is a hostage situation. So I ordered somebody to take precise fire, and it played out that the hostage taker got away, and the hostage was wounded but still alive. And for this decision, I was berated and mocked. My cadre, who was the instructor, was furious and gave me no time to explain my actions. He was frankly bewildered, and he told us, no, you shoot them until they change shape. And this saying became the motto of my squad for the duration of training. Shoot them until they change shape. I failed training this first time, and that was a good thing because upon recycling, I had until the fall before the next course began, and that gave me time. It gave me time to move in with Pam and meet my future sons, Christian and Damien, and it gave me time to question how my actions were impacting others. I chose to question the discomfort that pervaded me because I would come home angry and irritated, and it was hurting the people that I loved. I wanted to be a good father to them, and that is what started, as Ms. Kendra called it, my awakening. I threw myself into Buddhist and Stoic texts so I could learn to be happy while still doing the job I was training for. It is important that I did not set out to be a conscientious objector. At the time, I still wanted to be a Green Beret. And when I went to Squad Unit Tactics for the second time in the fall of 2018, I questioned everything that we were being trained to do. When people showed delight in their desire to kill, I was deeply disturbed. By the end, I was done training for myself. I was only there because I wanted to make my dad proud and graduate for him. And then after SUT, I was in another hold until survival and resistance training. And you just taught how to survive in the woods. And if you're captured, you're taught how to resist interrogation. And during that time, I spent studying philosophy. And that unsettling me in me continued to grow. Every time I put on the uniform, I was left nauseated and repulsed. And every time I have to today, I still get those feelings. And it was in the spring of 2019 that I first contacted Ms. Lenore and Mr. Steve with my concerns, and we began working on my CO application. It was during this process of writing the application and reflecting while I was attending medical sergeant school that I had my moment of crystallization. And in a lot of texts, it refers to that as when somebody knows that they're a CO. In the morning, before walking down the steps into the schoolhouse in the summer of 2019, I was researching articles written by conscientious objectors and their stories. One article stood out to me. I can't recall this gentleman's name and I can't find the article again, but my experiences and his story were eerily identical. The events may have been different, but at the core, we were somebody who really believed in the military, and then being exposed to it, we grew to oppose it. And then his story culminated in his crystallization, and I just broke down my car. I started crying with the affirmation that I was not going crazy, that what I was feeling was normal, and that others had gone through it as well. In October of 2019, I submitted my CO application a month before I was set to graduate the SFQC. While I still am waiting approval for my packet, I would not change my decision. It has been hard these last 2 years, but even at my lowest points, it's still better than the alternative, because I'm at home with my loving and then pregnant wife, and now I got a 5-month-old, which is awesome, and my 2 sons. And I was not hiding in the woods of a foreign land, plotting to ambush and massacre fathers, mothers, siblings, and children. The events I'm sharing right now are by no means the only ones that weigh on me and factored into my decision. And like everyone here, we probably won't have enough time to get into every single one. Sometimes it is the smallest of interactions that push us the most. I'm just glad that I was pushed off the path of war and onto the path of loving kindness. Thank you all for listening. I love each of you for your attention.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Christopher. And it may even be during our Q&A, some more pieces will come out. Next up is JD Reisinger from the Ohio National Guard. And he has his own story to tell of how he got here.
Yeah, I feel like I clear the air. That was a great story, man. Thank you for sharing. So yeah, now to settle into my story. So here we go. And I just want to say too, I'm going to miss a lot of the parts of my story. There's, like Steve and Lenore were saying, I ended up writing 51 pages in my application, so I'm going to skip a lot. So please, anything you're feeling interested in hearing about in my story or have questions about, please ask me after. I'm an open book, but we'll probably forget some things. But nonetheless, we'll start here. So I was raised in a small town called Swanton, jokingly called Swantucky because of how small it was. But there was a small airport next to Toledo that people use as like an express airport. And there was also a military base on it as well. And a lot of my coaches and stuff growing up were, sorry, I'm actually going to block you guys out so I can just.
JD, you muted yourself. Can you?
Oh, gosh. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay. So a lot of my coaches and stuff in junior high and growing up worked at the 180th, worked at where I would eventually enlist at. And I was kind of always seen as like a hardworking person, as someone who had like a lot of integrity. Being in the military was something I always was interested in. I always talked about Army stuff and was super intrigued with the whole strategic processings and all of these things. And so when sports ended for me in high school, my coaches were very much kind of like, hey, let me show you the base, let me show you this. It's kind of more family oriented than say like active duty. And I knew that because my brother was active Army. So I was pretty excited to have like a family of like, well, just a family that had like a meaningful purpose when sports and things ended for me. That was like a big gap for me in my life. So I was really happy to have that transition. So I applied when I signed up when I was 17 and a half with my parents there. I was pretty eager to join, pretty eager to get my school paid for. And I went to basic training a month after I graduated high school. So I was pretty like, let's do this. Oh gosh, I hope that didn't mess with anything. Okay, cool. So I went to basic training and largely felt, I think as Christopher shared, I felt very uncomfortable at basic training. I kind of was like, I'm just uncomfortable because I'm away from family and my girlfriend at the time. And then I came back home. I had a break in training. Ended up breaking up with my girlfriend, then went to tech school. Weird experiences because my job was in ammo. My job was to build bombs. And I remember feeling really weird when they were talking about putting warheads on foreheads, and this kind of like pride and like mass murder seemed not so much what I had known and experienced at the 180th with these very friendly, family-oriented people. So I kind of sketched it up to, oh, that's how active duty is and not the Guard. Because I knew a lot of people out there. I'm like, this isn't the people I know. So I came back, and when I was on my on-job training, I remember feeling very depressed and just extremely depressed. And it was because I was in the military that I was feeling this way, but I was trying to just continue on. I was thinking, oh, it's probably because I broke up with my girlfriend, or it's because of this, or I'm transitioning, or because sports ended and I'm trying to find whatever. And so I'm back for a month, and I ended up finding this book called Everyday Zen by Joko Beck. And I read this book, and it completely, it was like one of the best books I've ever read. And it completely spoke like right to me. It was just very like simple and straightforward. It's kind of stoic, kind of like Chris was mentioning. It's kind of stoic, but it was like, just like do what you're doing, like live your life as it is. And I really appreciated that kind of intensity and that focus. It really spoke to my wrestler, as a wrestler in high school, really spoke to that. And it also said, oh, I can be happy as well. So it wasn't like the military side where it's like, hey, we're intense and focused, but we're also committing mass murder. And starting to see that there was a path of happiness, and the path that I was on currently was not so much, it was not feeling happy for me at the time. So I ended up finding a Buddhist temple near me, as in Google searched Buddhist temple near me. And I was living in a small town, so I had to drive out like 45 minutes to go practice with these Buddhists I didn't know. And my parents, I was living with my parents at the time, were largely confused as to why I was leaving. So I had to tell them I'm going to a church service because they were not okay with the idea of me being a Buddhist, especially my stepdad. So after about 3 or 4 times of going to practice with them, I practiced with them every Wednesday for the first year. So we're, just to contextualize, we're about a year into my enlistment and about 2 months being back. And so I'm going every Wednesday, and my stepdad asked me one day, so what church are you going to on Wednesdays? And I looked him in the eyes. It was like, I'm going to the Buddhist temple in Toledo. And he was very, very outraged. And it was one of our first interactions of him expressing his distaste towards Buddhism. And he threatened me and told me not to talk about it to my little brother because how much my little brother looked up to me. So I started to struggle then with this, man, this path is cool of Zen and Buddhism, and this path I'm on, my family doesn't like it, military doesn't feel like it. So my engagement only continued from here. I was going every Wednesday, and then in 3 months of involvement, I ended up taking the Buddhist precepts, going through a process called Jukai. I got a Buddhist name, which was really cool, named Fuzen. I joined a really amazing community of people. This was a process that took a week, 2-week long meditation retreats, sewed my own robe. A lot of work was put into this. It's a very meaningful thing for me. And at that point, I was really, because I took a precept that said, do not kill, I was really starting to question, oh gosh, how am I gonna navigate these two paths? So I was talking to my spiritual teachers at the time, getting advice from them, only continuing my practice even more. And I was attending monthly session retreats. And session is our intensive meditation practice period. So we practice for like a whole weekend straight. I was doing that every single month, plus the Wednesdays. And so I was getting more and more involved. I was loving it. So about 1.5 years into this time frame of practicing Buddhism, really starting to feel a strong distaste towards being in the military, and not knowing how to deal with it, but talking to people. And I think about 2 years in, I discerned to become a Shokin student. So this is a direct relationship with the teacher. It's like a spiritual marriage. So this is very serious. And you have to contemplate this position for 1 year before you formally sew on and put on a gray robe. So if you came into the temple, you see people with gray robes and a black rakusu, black robe. And that would be the position I was holding, which means an extreme kind of commitment to the teachers and to the community. So after 1 year of discerning, I was heavily resistant to military service, mainly because there was times where I would be meditating and chanting sutras like saving all beings. And like with this food, I take to nourish myself and the promise to alleviate suffering for everyone on, say, all day Friday, and then waking up early on Saturday, meditating for the 1.5 hours, and then going to drill weekend. So literally putting on the robe and then putting on the uniform in the same weekend multiple times. And this was when I was really like, I mean, you can't not see that. Like it's physical, pretty physical change. So, yeah, that was just a real intense period of investigation for me. And I remember I had one final talk with my teacher about this, and he was really trying to get me to continue with it, just because it was only a few more years, all these things. He wasn't trying to get me to continue with it, but he was advocating, maybe not, he's a very smart guy. He's just kind of eventually asked me, what's your plan? And I actually, that day, about halfway through my discernment, so about 2 years into Buddha's practice, wrote out an A through like K thing I would do. If they do this, I'll do this. They do this, I'll do this. And I would put some serious stuff. I know I'm kind of getting close on time. I'll wrap it up in a few minutes. But I was getting into like step A, tell them, no, I'm not going to deploy. Step B, if they make me deploy, then tell them Buddhism, and then this. And then it got all the way to like, literally, my feeling was so just like, I will go in there and like literally like smoke a joint in front of whoever. And that was not even the final list. It was like, I am willing to like break my legs to not go on a deployment. I'm willing to someone else break my legs. And like, these are serious feelings of, there's no way I'm going to go on a deployment. And that was primarily because of, for me, what it was about for me was I didn't want the practice of Buddhism and of being able to sit and do the work or do the practice that we endeavor to practice. That to me was seeming like it was in conflict with if I were to go on a deployment, if I were to take action of pretty much any sort. I also practice Aikido, the way of harmony. I practice Zen, and pretty clearly it's like having creating good karma, creating good effects in the world so that you can be effective in your practice is very important. Like, we are really careful about what we do. We're very mindful. We're very mindful people. We really care about, I do, not all Buddhists, but care about, what we eat, how we speak. These are things that are very important, part of our practice. So any military experience became pretty apparent that I was just not going to do that. And that list was pretty indicative of that 2 years in. And then I'm finishing up here. About 3 years in, December 2019, I finished up a week-long meditation retreat for my Shokin ceremony. So the end of that 1 year contemplation, I had just this amazing experience of just clear seeing, you could say, just clear seeing of myself and reality. And it was almost impossible to see myself so clearly, and then to kind of go, and it felt like lying almost. It felt just like a lie, that a mask I couldn't even put on, like, yeah, I care about this, or I'm going to stick it out. And it was actually at that retreat a friend mentioned I seek out the Quaker counseling, because he knew of them. So he saved me. Someone mentioned lucky connections. That was a very lucky connection for me. And so, yeah, running out of time here, but it was that moment that I was pretty much like, yeah, there's no way I can even BS this anymore. I'm getting out, and I'm willing to lose everything, and every ounce of money I've made, I'm willing to pay that back as well. So was pretty clear to me that my decision was ready to be made. But I know I'm running out of time, and I'll end it there. Maybe you guys can ask some questions at the end.
Thank you, JD.
Mhm.
These are such powerful stories. I wish we had 5 minutes of silence in between each one to just kind of consider it. I'm really grateful. Next on our panel is Alyssa Fairfax. Alyssa is our first conscientious objector from the Space Force, which is part of the Air Force. She applied in October of 2020 and just got word last week that she has been approved as a conscientious objector. So we're all so excited for her. That was a fast one. I'll let her tell her story.
Thank you so much. But yeah, I'm so excited. I'm out processing now, everyone. But to get into the start of my story, as Lenore said, my name is Alyssa. I joined the United States Air Force 26 months ago in 2019. I joined for a lot of the same reasons that other people join, the education benefits. I'm from Philadelphia, and I wanted to get out of Philadelphia. I love my city, but I wanted access to other opportunities that I wouldn't be able to find in the inner city, as well as just a different perspective. And then also my biological father, he passed away when I was very young, and he served in the Army. And I kind of felt like a connection just serving to him, like a connection to him by serving. So those were some of the reasons that I joined. Very different than the reasons that I'm leaving. But when I first got to my base where I'm stationed at now, my job is air traffic control. When I first got here to Patrick Space Force Base, I was feeling kind of stressed and overwhelmed. Air traffic is just one of those jobs where you're going to feel stressed and overwhelmed while you're in training. And I was feeling alone. And I was at the point in life where I was doing soul searching and trying to find myself spiritually specifically. So I was going to church with friends and whatnot during tech school, during basic training, even before I joined the military. I was going to Buddhist temples as well, JD, but not in Ohio or anything, and not as nearly as in-depth as you were. But ultimately, my mom, she is a Catholic. She was Catholic. She was born and raised Catholic, but she converted to Islam when I was very young. And when I was telling her how stressed I was at my base doing air traffic, she actually sent me a Quran. Growing up, she never really forced religion on myself or my brothers. She was encouraging, but never forceful. And for a while, I tried to practice Islam just because, as a little girl, you want to be like your mommy. But it didn't last long. As I became a teenager, I felt really restricted. My friends were all going to church together, and I was jealous. And they got to wear mini skirts and tube tops, and I couldn't. and I wanted to be a cheerleader and I wasn't allowed to. So just little things like that. When you start to become your own person, I felt really disconnected from the religion. So I didn't pursue it in my teenage years. But when I got here 2 years ago, or September of 2019, I started to actually take the religion more seriously and try to learn about it. At the same time, at work, I was doing really good. I like air traffic as a job in general. I was good at it. I had really awesome people who were teaching me, and I felt good knowing that I was good at it. But there were other things that I learned since joining that started to conflict with how I felt spiritually, because I felt like Islam, despite some media coverage and some really bad apples giving the whole religion a bad name, it's really peaceful if you study it and you're applying it the way that you're supposed to, and not just taking it and making your own rules from it. But I felt like I wasn't doing something peaceful, similar to what JD was saying about the whole warheads on foreheads thing. You get drilled with that. And I was in my first term airman course, which is something that every airman has to take when they first get to their duty station, their first duty station. And we share why we joined. And some people in that class were so intense and made me very uncomfortable. One guy said that he joined so that he could paint his face with the blood of his enemies. And I'm just like, that's not what I'm here for, That's not why I joined. We had a simulator in the security force squadron where they simulated real life, like hostage situations or active shooting situations, or just common domestic calls or issues that a security force member would see. And we had to act it out. And it just so happened that my class was filled with mostly security force personnel. There were only maybe 3 or 4 of us that were not in that career field. So it was really disheartening seeing some of these real life situations and these real life scenarios of like hostage situations where hostages are getting shot and getting killed in the simulator, and people taking it really lightly and laughing about it and making a joke out of it. And that's something that made me even more uncomfortable. And at the same time, I was hearing stories from people at my tower who retired from the military and now they're Department of the State employees, government employees. And they were telling me how they would clear bombers in a different country, in foreign countries, clear bombers to take off, and they'd be coming back empty. And it just made me feel some type of way because that's what I'm doing. And it's on my conscience. Sorry guys, I'm getting emotional, but obviously I'm not directly on the ground, a Green Beret or anything, but you do kind of see how what you do impacts other people and other people's lives. And it was hard for me to keep a job where I felt like I was playing a part in killing people or being like disruptive. And I don't know, I just feel like myself and my friends that I have in the military, a lot of us, we're just regular people. Like this is just a job to so many people. And you got to think that when you go to someone else's country or you invade someone else's land or you're fighting someone else's military, they're everyday people too, They have kids, they have families, they have hobbies, they have interest. And it weighed heavily on me. So first I thought I was crazy, guys. I was like on Google, like, am I crazy? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I losing sleep over this? And it wasn't affecting my job performance, but I was losing sleep. And as an air traffic controller, you have to have, like by law, a certain amount of sleep that you're getting just so that you're mentally ready and able to do your job. And I felt really bad that I wasn't even meeting that requirement. I was up with anxieties so much of the night. So I said something to my supervisor, and I just had like a breakdown in my control tower one day and told her how I felt and what I was thinking. And she's like, do you want to go to mental health? And I'm just like, you think I'm crazy too, but yeah, let's go. So she took me to mental health, and I got to talk to someone. But later that day or the next day or whatever, I Googled like, what are these feelings? Like, what's wrong with me? And Quaker House came up, Conscientious Objector came up, which I didn't even know what it really was, I hadn't remembered that it was a thing until I started to, resonate with it. And I was at work, I went down to the break room and I literally called and Lenore answered right there in the control tower, you know, and I'm like, hi, my name's Alyssa. This is how I feel. Am I crazy? And she's just, you know, assuring me, yeah, assuring me that I'm not crazy and just making me feel valid and good and everything. And that's kind of where my process started. So thank goodness for you guys, Stephen and Lenore, because in the beginning of my application process, I ended up turning in about like a 30-page paper or 15 pages front and back. But in the beginning, I was getting so much misinformation from my chain of command. And I was being told like, this should be 2 pages or this should be a memorandum. And I'm like, I don't even know how to write it. And a memorandum, I'm an A1C, I don't make that much. You're like, what are you talking about? But, you know, Lenore and Steve, they really helped me out. And I appreciate you guys so much for that. But, you know, it came with a certain level of, I don't want to say hazing, but isolation. So like I said the other day, and I'll just say it again to my fellow panel, I really affirm you guys. I know how hard it is to do this and step up and, you know, be true to yourself, especially in an environment where you're looked at weird for doing it. But yeah, it comes with isolation. It comes with people judging you. It comes with, you know, maybe some levels of hazing depending on what your career field is or where you're stationed and what the norm is there. But ultimately, speaking as someone who just got approved, once it's all done, like despite the hazing, despite the isolation, despite any doubts that you may have or the long process that it is, it does feel so good once you're told like, hey, you're getting out. And the first thing I did, I came home and I called Steve and Lenore and they celebrated on the phone with me for a minute, and it's all worth it in the end. So that's pretty much my story. I'm sure I left out a whole bunch of things, but you know, we'll get to it later.
Thank you.
Okay. One of the ironies about this that I'm sure everybody on the panel is feeling is that in this process, the burden of proof is on the applicant. And so some of the references you're hearing are people send us applications at the beginning and we're like, that's good, but say more about this piece and tell more what that transition. And we make them keep including more and more details. So I feel really bad that tonight we're saying, can you try to keep this to like, 10 minutes or so? We're doing the opposite of what we normally do. We've set them up for this and they're all looking at us like, what do you mean you're telling me to tell more all the time? So I appreciate everybody trying to abbreviate your story because I know it is tough. And I think, we could spend a whole night with each of you telling your story. Maybe at some point we'll try to document that somehow because I think there really is so much more to everything. So with that said, David Heiss is at West Point and I think submitted the written application. Was it end of January, early February? You'd have to fill me in even.
I tried it in February, but they didn't accept it until March.
Okay, so March. Okay, well, David, why don't you tell your story?
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everybody. I'm David Heiss, as he said. Very honored to be here. I think that sharing testimony is very important to the process of bringing new people into our views on nonviolence and making a better world. So I'm really honored to be able to share my story tonight with you all. I grew up in rural Virginia. My dad was in the Army for 30 years. Both my family and my community are very conservative, Christian, patriotic, echo chambers. So as far back as I can remember, all I ever wanted to do was follow my dad's footsteps and serve in the Army. So when I was in high school, starting to look at schools to apply to, and naturally West Point comes up as kind of the best thing you can do if you want to be in the Army and you're looking to go to college. So I applied in 2016. I graduated high school, and that summer I started at West Point. And my first year was incredible. I loved it. Felt like I was in the right place. Really just ate up all the propaganda and was just very, very deep into the Army. And sophomore year, I started taking classes in my major, which is history. And I took this class called Warfare Since 1945, where my teacher wanted to focus on kind of like freedom movements and like liberation struggles in the global South during like the Cold War. And it was honestly the first time in my life that I had read anything that was like the United States is not like the greatest country on earth and everything they do is right, which didn't change my mind overnight, but that class really kind of left me with a lot of questions and a lot of wondering how many things I'd grown up with weren't really how I thought they were. So that summer after my sophomore year, I had the opportunity to go join a unit in Fort Lewis, Washington, and kind of shadow an officer to see what I'd be doing after I graduated. And it was a pretty weird time, but one thing that really stood out to me in my trip there was a soldier in our unit who was kind of like, he was very well liked in the unit, and his big claim to fame was that his previous unit had been essentially disbanded, and all the soldiers had been spread out to different units around the country because they'd committed so many infractions and abuses on their last deployment in Iraq. And he was like, everybody looked up to this guy, and every day everyone was joking about the things he'd done and joking about the things he'd seen. And I laughed along with them. And I remember going back to my hotel one day after work, and just like, once you guys step back from here, just why are we talking about this? Why is this funny to everybody? And what kind of thing am I doing here? And is this really what the Army's like? Because this isn't what my dad talked about, every day of my life growing up. So I finished up my time there feeling a little weird about the Army and what I was doing, but still pretty set on serving. And I went straight into my junior year of college. And at the beginning of your junior year at West Point, all the cadets sign your service obligation. And it's as serious as that should be. It's really kind of treated as a given thing. Nobody talks about it really. Maybe one or two people don't sign and they just disappear, but nobody, it's kind of like an accepted thing. And I was no different. I signed it, didn't really think about it, and got back to my room that night and just kind of was like, what the heck did I just do? This is kind of like a huge dose of reality. And I just remember sitting there thinking do I even know what the Army is? Do I even know what I'm getting into? Is this really who I am? And so that really started off a lot of doubts. And like any good historian, I just decided that books would provide me all the answers I need. So I started getting my hands on whatever I could in terms of global history, US history, political philosophy, things of that nature in my copious amounts of free time. So really started reading a lot of that stuff and forming a lot of political critiques of American foreign policy. I had a lot of problems with kind of our conduct in Iraq and Afghanistan, along with our conduct in Vietnam and essentially every war since other than maybe World War II. I didn't really have a strong grasp on nonviolence at this point. I dipped my toes into MLK a little bit with Stride Towards Freedom, but I kind of avoided it and just read it for the aspect of kind of public movements rather than as a nonviolent read. So I continued studying and thinking throughout my junior year and really started to feel very at odds with a lot of the things that I was getting taught at West Point and a lot of the speakers that were coming and speaking to us. And so that went on for the rest of the year, but I didn't really have a good log on what I wanted to do in life. So as senior year came around, I kind of realized I need to figure out what's going on here and what I'm going to do in my life, because if I graduate, I mean, I'm in the Army, and this is my chance to kind of do something if I'm going to leave. So I contacted an Army lawyer at West Point and started trying to size up what my options were. And I pretty quickly realized that I could kind of put my head down for 5 years and get through it, or pay an insane amount of money. So at that point, I decided I would just put my head down and get through it, despite my doubts and despite my real problems with how America was conducting itself around the world. So I started talking to my teachers instead and trying to find what job in the Army I could do where maybe I could just dodge deployments for 5 years, not have to touch weapons, and just kind of do something and get it over with. And I settled on being a Black Hawk pilot. I thought, they don't have control over weapon systems, and I'll just get a skill, get it over with, and get out. I also told my parents about my feelings at this time, And they really told me the same thing. They said, like, just put your head down and get through it. And like, what you're feeling is like fine, but you're wrong. And like, the Army is like essentially a good thing for the world, and you're doing the right thing by like continuing like in the process of service. So with all that in mind, I just went back to my books and back to reading and thinking and debating with my friends and peers, and started to dig a lot more into nonviolence at this point. And this coincided with a lot of courses I was taking on insurgency movements and kind of like freedom fights, which up to this point I had regarded as purely moral and like probably the only way you could effectively use violence and have it still be right. But when I read that in conjunction with things like Gandhi and A.J. Must and Charles McCarthy, I really started to develop this idea that I believe that violence in all forms was immoral. And it was probably around December to January of 2019, 2020 that I finally was like, I'm not okay with violence in any form. I don't ever want to kill anybody or be involved in any of this. And as much as I felt good about that feeling, I didn't really change my situation at all, because I was still facing a massive fine if I left the military. So I kept my head down and made it through to graduation. And I remember graduation day, I was sitting out there on our parade field, and I just felt so ashamed of myself, and I just couldn't get it out of my head. Like, how have you gotten to this point? You know what the right answer is, and you're just ignoring it. I really felt like I was just being a huge coward. And so I graduated, and the only thing I was happy that day was that I wouldn't have to take classes anymore, and that I could have some free time. And luckily I didn't have to go to my unit, because I had a couple of surgeries I was recovering from. So I stayed at West Point after graduation. Just spent a lot more time reading and thinking. I don't really have really much of a job here, so I just kept doing a lot of thinking, and talked to my girlfriend a lot that summer about what the kind of situation I was in. And she told me, like, you know it's right, you need to do it, like, damn the consequences. And that was honestly the first time anyone had ever told me, like, it's okay to leave the Army. And so I really took that to heart, thought about it a lot, and really dove back into reading. And in like November, December, I reached out to GI Rights Hotline and said, hey, do you guys have somebody I could talk to? I'm really looking to figure out what I can do here. And they set me up with Jake, who was a conscientious objector out of the Marine Corps. And he really supported me and talked me through how the process looks and realistically what it would look like if I did it. And so I took his words to heart, his advice to heart, along with support from my girlfriend and my therapist. And I reached back out to GI Rights Hotline, and I said, I really want to do this. Can you get me in touch with someone who can help me? And they sent me to Stephen Lenore. I started writing up my statement, and 20 million drafts later, I was able to put it in February, and my commander just kind of ignored it, and it took another 4 or 5 weeks before they finally said, okay, he's actually serious about this, and we have to deal with it. So it's kind of where I'm at now. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, David. And last but definitely not least, Amante Crawley. Amante is in the Ohio National Guard. He's in the Army National Guard. JD is Air National Guard in the same state. And I'll let Amante tell his story.
How you doing? I'm Amante Crawley, but I'm not very good at talking in public, so bear with me. So I want to say I joined the National Guard in 2019, 2020, 2019, I think. I had no intentions on joining the Army at all. I actually skipped class one day, and my recruiter was at my lunch table. He was like, do you want to shoot guns, blow cars up, shoot snipers, shoot tanks. I'm like, yeah, that sounds fun. I had no intentions, didn't think of anything of it. So that's basically how I got inside the Army. I talked to my mom about it. She like, I think you're making a rush decision. You know, I didn't care. I just wanted to shoot guns and all that. So I ended up, what we do in the National Guard is we have like monthly things where they get you ready for basic. And I enjoyed that for a little bit. I enjoyed the working out, and yeah, that stuff was fun. So then as soon as I got to basic, well, 30th AG is where I started to see a different side of the Army, things I didn't like. At 30th AG, I witnessed somebody commit suicide, which wasn't the best. I seen a couple people go AWOL. I seen a lot of people go AWOL actually, because at 30th AG, they didn't treat us too well. When we first got there, they gave us like 2 hours to sleep the first 3 days, 2 hours to sleep. So I was pretty exhausted from that, plus the yelling and the intensity. Like, I'm in a whole new environment that I'm just not used to at all. And I didn't enjoy it at all. So then I want to say when I got to basic is when I really started to learn that like the Army wasn't for me. I was just around a bunch of people that were there to murder, basically. Like they wanted blood on their hands. And like, I never understood that. Like, and they would ask me, why did I join? I was like, I'm just here for the ride. I was like, I just came. So then, as I would tell them, like, I don't think murdering is right, or killing is right, or going in other countries and invading is right, they would tell me how I was soft, or how I was weak, or just really just words that actually hurt. And I really don't let words get to me. But when I'm there and that's all I hear all day for 7 months, like, it eventually starts to affect me. So then I started talking to my drill sergeants about it. And my drill sergeants were even worse. They really got down on me, started cussing me out, started making me do things I didn't want to do. And they will also tell stories where they will talk about their deployments and how they invaded places and stuff like that. And like, those stories really scared me, need to say. They would talk about how they would set IEDs off and it'd be a mist of blood everywhere. And I remember this one specific story my drill sergeant told me where he ended up crying at the end of it, and he ended up breaking down real bad and he just froze. And the drill sergeants had to get him out of there because he started to have like a little panic attack. That scared me real bad. So then we finally got to go to church on Sundays. And I would ask the pastor at the church, the chaplain, I would ask him, like, is there any way I can like switch my MOS? Like, I can do something. Is there a way to get out of anything? So he really didn't help me at all. He said, there's no way. God loves infantry. Like, the chaplain at my, where I was at, he just preached that God loves the infantry. God loves the Army. If you do this, God don't love you. That's basically how he put it, but he didn't say it that way. Like, if you weren't in the Army, God didn't love you. So I'm just get to really the important parts. My mom ended up sending me a Bible. I read my Bible every day because that's all I had. I had no TVs. They wouldn't allow crossword puzzles. They wouldn't allow anything. So I just ended up reading my Bible every day. It's when I really started to get close to God. And I started to learn, like, this isn't right. Like, what was happening, where I was at. So I want to say around, I'm not sure when COVID hit. I want to say COVID hit around February. When it hit hard, I didn't know about COVID at all. They didn't tell us about COVID at all. They said it was a virus going around. We're going to give you 10 minutes to call your families. And that's it. So I called my mom, 10 minutes. I'm like, are you okay? She didn't tell me really what was happening because I guess she didn't want to scare me or anything. But that was the 10-minute phone call we got. And then we were supposed to, we graduated basic and we were supposed to go to AIT. Now with some AIT schools, people get to have little dorm rooms and all that. We didn't get that. We were still, they call it basic training 2.0. It was still basic training. Like we still had to sleep in a 50-man bay and that sucked. So usually they would give us off-base passes. And I want to say the off-base passes started going away slowly as COVID got worse. But mind you, they still haven't told us about COVID. Some people knew, but they didn't know the severity of it. So our passes started to go away slowly and slowly. So they just let us use our phone more. And our phone starts to go away slowly and slowly. So now the drive to do anything, morale was just low, like extremely low. So when COVID got real bad, I don't remember when, I want to say when everybody had to go into quarantine. We still didn't know anything bad about the severity of COVID. So they ended up sending us out into the woods to quarantine. We quarantined for 2 months in the woods. Every Sunday, they would send us back to take a shower and wash our clothes. And sometimes we wouldn't even be able to wash our clothes because everybody fighting over the dryers. Meanwhile, me already hating the Army, this is just making it worse. And like, I'm trying to read my Bible and I'm trying to stay close to God, but like, it's getting to the point where like, I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, why is this happening? Like, why did this happen now? Why did any of this have to happen now? So it will be times where you just sitting in the woods and it's just raining. It should just be the worst. Like you just break down. I had a couple breakdowns in there. And it got real bad to the point where people weren't allowed to go to the defect to go eat. So we had to start getting MREs. So the drill sergeants will forget to bring us our MREs and we wouldn't be able to eat. So it was literally people fighting over food. Some people were going in the garbage, grabbing some more MREs, grabbing some MRE trash and trying to eat it. And it got to the point where we had a little bit of a rebel against the drill sergeants because they were still making us work. And like, we're exhausted, we're rained on, we have zero clothing, our clothes stink, we have nothing. So the drill sergeant was still trying to make us work. And like, we just threw our guns down. It's like, we can't do this. And then I started, I personally spoke up at one point saying like, this isn't right for me. I don't agree with what you guys do. I don't agree with what's happening. I respect that you made this decision, but like this isn't for me. And then they would get in my face. They would yell at me. It was like, I tried to quit multiple times, but they wouldn't let me. And I would just keep reading my Bible and praying like, please God, like just get me out of this. So thankfully the basic training had ended, AIT had ended. I graduated. I was happy, but I wasn't because I knew I still had to participate in the Army. But I knew like finally I can at least go home. So as I'm getting on as we're going back to the airport, as you all know, Atlanta Airport is a pretty big airport. When I got there, no exaggeration, it seemed like the apocalypse. Like nobody was around. And I didn't know what was going on. I'm seeing on TV, they playing on TV, CNN about COVID and what's going on. So then as I finally get to call my mom for the first time, and she told me everything that happened since I've been gone. And like, it was crazy. So then I still kept my Bible, still reading my Bible. I finally got to my unit and I told my unit, I'm like, I don't think this is for me. They didn't say anything about it really. They just blew it off their chest and didn't really care for it. So I went home, I started looking up, like, I knew the Army respected religion. So I started figuring out ways where I can get out that way. And where I finally, that's when I met Lenore. I ended up talking to Lenore. You know, she made me feel safe. She was my safe haven. Not gonna lie, she was my safe haven. Every time I talked to her, I feel happy. I calmed down because I will always have a lot of anxiety, my heart push and all that. I calmed down. And it was a point in time where I actually stopped talking to her because I did tell my sergeant I'm thinking about getting out, and I did get a little bit scared because I didn't want to be talked down on again like I was in basic. I was nervous. And then I forgot why this riot happened, but a riot happened in Washington, I think it was, where they were going to send me to. And my heart panicked again because at this point I was a private first class and were putting me in a position of a sergeant where they gave me a gun. And with that gun, I actually had a decision to like, if we let off fire or not. And that, I think that's what blew it. And I'm like, okay, I really got to talk to Lenore. So I finally called them again. I'm like, I'm sorry I got out of contact with you. I was just scared. I was nervous, but I really like want to get out of here. So we ended up talking. They helped me get out of my situation, and they helped me develop my long essay. Like you said, a million edits later. I never did an essay that long in my life, but it finally helped me. I turned it into my first sergeant. Needless to say, my first sergeant commander, they were very helpful. Thank God they were very helpful. They are still helpful. And I have my first interview with a chaplain next month, I want to say. The first of 3. Yeah, that's my story.
Thank you, Amante. Thank you all for sharing such a deep piece of what life has been like for you these last couple of years. It's just a real gift for all of us to hear these stories.
Yeah, and I think one thing probably everyone's noticing is there's not one single path that gets people here. You hear a lot of similarities, but everybody's got their own story and their own version of what got them to this point of realizing they just couldn't participate in war making anymore. So we were going to move on to the question and answer part here. And I think Lenore and I might have a couple questions we were going to ask the panel. And in the meantime, I think some of you picked up on this, but just as a reminder, if you have questions to submit, some of you who are usually on Zoom meetings might put them in the chat, but I don't think that's going to go out here. There's another, I don't know what you call it, icon down there that says Q&A, and that is where you can post questions, and we will try to get through the questions you post there as well. So you can submit questions there while we're going to start off with a couple questions for the panel. Were you first or am I first? Okay. So I think Alyssa already talked about this a little bit. Well, maybe actually we're going to do a different question first. Maybe the first thing I just say is, what was the hardest part of this whole process of deciding you're ready to apply for conscientious objection? And maybe each of you could take a minute to speak to that.
The hardest part for me was everyone else's perception, having to get through how everyone else is viewing you. And that's people that you work with, as well as people in your personal life, your family and your friends, these are people who respected you so much for joining. And now you're telling them like, hey, I'm in the process of getting out and this is why. And then the work relationships are a lot different if you're even going to work, depending on your situation. And as I was stating before, there is like a level of isolation in the workplace, a level of maybe hazing in the workplace and things like that takes place. So for me, the hardest part was how other people reacted to my decision. I wouldn't change it, but I would change their reactions if I could.
Thanks.
Honestly, I would say the hardest part for me was just manning up and telling them like I don't want to do this, because like I said, I hated being talked down on, and that was the hardest part for me.
I think the hardest part for me was just like accepting the reality of the consequences. I think it's a little bit of a different situation coming out of my scenario. I had a lot more of a financial consequence, which I'm really not proud that held me back as long as it did. But it really took me a long time to wrap my head around dealing with the consequences of what I was going to do. Because I think a lot of people feel like, I know I certainly felt like I'm doing the right thing. Why should I be like punished for it? And it really, I think a lot of the process really does feel like you're kind of being punished for doing the right thing. So that was the worst part for me.
Maybe I'll just follow up on that. And I saw this is partly covered in one of the questions. Let's say you're an enlisted person in the military. If you declare yourself a conscientious objector and get out, you stop getting paid, and the benefits you get will depend on how much time you serve. Pretty much everybody we work with gets an honorable discharge. So if you have enough time, and you might get, if you're in 2 years, you might get VA benefits still. If you're in, you would get a portion of GI Bill. If you're in 3 years before you decide, you might get the whole GI Bill. So it's very different case by case. But for someone like David, who has gotten what is in essence a scholarship to West Point, and then you don't accept your commission, it's a very different thing, because then they want the money back that they paid for your education, because they're paying that to get this time back. So just the finances are very different for a situation like that, in that it's like, okay, now you've got to reimburse us for the 4 years of college. We'll let you out, but you got to reimburse us for this. So it's a huge dollar amount in a situation like that. Just if that helps clarify it for people. And then I think Christopher and JD, we're still going to talk about their hardest parts.
So probably the hardest part for me still happens every single time I have to put on the uniform, because every action has like a ripple effect. And by putting on that uniform and walking out my door, I'm representing an organization that supports death around the world. And that's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I would say the hardest for me was just the whole identity aspect was what kind of kept me from making the decision for so long. I knew about the GI rights counseling program about 1.5 years into my 3-year kind of process. But yeah, I was really scared to like present a different self to people, as some people shared, like, oh, I'm now not with this. And it's so fueled by everyone being together and cohesive, and you can really feel it when one person is like, yeah, this is not okay. It's like it's like being a rock just put in a stream, except you're putting yourself in that. And that's you'll feel the dissonance happening there, or the difference. And it's scary, like to be talking about this is one thing, but when a group, a lot of people, like 50 people, at least in my shop, all are on the same wavelength and they're vibing on their thing, and then for someone to be like, I don't know, it's like it's almost laughable in some senses. And like what David was saying, like kind of getting in trouble or feeling bad about doing the right thing, it's just a really interesting feeling. So having to grapple that is especially with your family too, is really interesting, like what Alyssa was saying. So yeah, a lot of kind of tough things there.
So some of you have already spoken about a lot about this next question we were going to ask. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to, like, what was it like to declare yourself in this environment of people who all believe one thing? Oh, guess what? Actually, I believe the exact opposite of all of you. And we're going to have to deal with that. And you might even want to add, some people have told me, that was super scary and they feel like the lone person. And then they say, but then people would kind of quietly come up to me and say, you're not the only one who thinks this way. So if there's pieces like that you want to share too, any of you who want to talk about, how isolated you felt, or if there were moments where, wait a minute, I'm not the only one who thinks this way,
Amante.
I could say in basic, I definitely felt alone. I would literally, like, at night, I would read my Bible inside the bathroom. I would get caught and yelled at plenty of times, but I really didn't care at this point. So I was really alone, and I was the only person that really believed in God inside my bay. And when I got to my unit, when I told everybody that I was becoming a conscientious objector, that I was ready to get out, people did clown me. I had a couple people say something about me, but there were a couple people on the side like, yo, I'm trying to do the same thing as you. I don't think this is right. I did point them to where I went to, you guys, Lenore and Steve. I'm not sure if they went or not, but yeah.
Great. Anybody else have thoughts? Alyssa? Yeah.
Yes, so I was telling some of you a few days ago when I went to go pick up my paperwork when I was approved to separate, I went to the personnel who I turned the application in, very different from when I first turned it in. When I first turned it in, I was so nervous and I like called one of my friends and I was like, can you give me a pep talk? I'm about to walk in there. I feel like they're gonna give me dirty looks, but they didn't. But when I went to go pick up my paperwork to out process, one of the guys there, I'm like, hi, I'm Airman Fairfax. And he's like, yeah, I know who you are. We were all rooting for you. We were passing around your application and you know, we all read it in here. And I'm just like, okay, that's nice. And then once he was printing out my checklist and things I needed, he was telling me privately he was previously security forces and he retrained, and he was just saying to me, he was like, you know, I really respect what you're doing. And if I knew about this a long time ago, I probably would have tried to do it as well. And you have some people who will come to you and tell you little stories about times that they were unsure about their service. And honestly, at my tower, that's how people started talking to me again. They were like ignoring me collectively. And then one at a time, they would come and say something like, you know, this one time. And then another one, you know, this one time. And I'm like, you guys are all sneaking to talk to me. Just talk to me openly in front of everyone else who's sneaking to talk to me. But yeah, you kind of do. Once you step up and you are true to yourself and you speak true to what you believe, people will start to do it as well. Because the idea, the doubts, the beliefs, they're not as uncommon as you think they are. A lot of people have them and they're just afraid to act on it, or they're too far into the careers to do anything, or they have families and they're putting that financial need or support that they get from the military ahead of what they believe, whatever the case is. But we're not as alone as we look. That's what I mean.
Thanks. Chris, is that was a yes to my question? Okay.
Yeah.
Someone, Donna had asked if Chris would feel comfortable talking about his father's reaction. His father was a Green Beret, and just wondering how your family reacted when you told them you were applying for as a conscientious objector.
So my parents did not take it well at all, because it goes against everything they believe. And they still they've accepted it, but they don't understand. And I get that, because if they tried to understand what I thought and think now, that would mean that everything my dad did for 25 years was wrong. And I don't know how anybody could live with that, because he warred for 25 years. And to look back on that time and say like, oh, what I did was wrong, I don't know how we could live with it. But yeah, it was not a pleasant conversation to have with them. I actually went back home to remodel my home that I purchased. And one of the last days I was there, I tried bringing it up to him, and it was a blowout fight. It did not go well, and it's still ongoing with him. I don't think he's still accepted it, so.
Thanks, Chris. JD, someone had asked what was the name of the book that you read, the first book that you read that had such an impact on you?
Yeah, the book was called Every Day Zen by Joko, Joko Beck, Beck. It's a great book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to just start going through these?
Sure.
Okay.
Go. So I just want you to know there's a lot of comments in the question and A, appreciation for all of you and the sharing that you're doing. Sandy Cohn asked, what was the most helpful information or advice that you received from Lenore and Steve? I'd be curious to know that too.
I think you guys just being there and like being an understanding voice for me. And then also really, you guys did a great job of like really making us question even more, which I was not quite prepared for. But it was good. I learned a lot more whenever throughout the process of writing the application with you guys. So.
Well, maybe let me clear something up here just in case the audience people want to share. When people talk about multiple revisions, I hope you all back me in this. Like, this wasn't us saying, no, you shouldn't believe that. You should believe this instead, or something like. I don't think it was ever our intent to change the beliefs of any of these applicants, as much as to tell that story and get it down in the kind of abundant detail that would make it just too hard for that board to turn them down, so that, you know, that these are going to go through. And there might have been a question like that related to this for people. We usually screen people in the beginning because, as you can see, this is a really involved process, and I wouldn't want someone who's not really going to have a chance of meeting that definition to, you know, waste a whole bunch of time and energy trying to get something that they'd probably get turned down on. But for people like the folks on this panel who really have these sincere beliefs, the success rate we have is close to 100%. And I'm not trying to take credit when I say part of that's because we try to have everybody tell their stories. I would say it's because people have these great stories and they get told, and that's what makes people recognize and approve these applications. So you say, oh, did anybody else want to say anything about the
I want to say something.
advice from us? Okay.
Don't be so modest. You guys do play a huge part. I'll say the #1 comment that I had on my essays from you guys, Lenore, you know, more details here. Explain this further. Give exact dates. How did this make you feel? Explain more, you know? So it is really nitty gritty. I've said before that you guys probably read my application more times than I did, and we appreciate that. And I agree with Christopher. The main thing that we get from you guys, in my perspective, that is so needed is that support. Because even if you're having it from your friends or from your family, or even from, you know, your command, they don't understand, and they can't help the way that you guys can. The way we specifically need help, and the way we specifically need that support. And you guys were there to advocate when we were getting, you know, me personally, I know when I was getting like some pushback or slow movement, you were the one saying, hey, go see these people face to face and see what's going on with your application. And, you know, it's just a different level of support that we get from you guys than we would from our friends or family or command, because you know so much more. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to share, I think, my gratitude, because Steve was the one who helped me. Just the skillfulness and the revision process was like, and maybe for everyone to know, can't tell who's watching, but just to know how helpful it is to have this kind of skill in this format. It's like such a niche thing. So to present something so serious that you can't even explain, and it looks like a 5-page thing, to have someone who's willing to sit there with you through that process and like really want to hear more, it's just like, I don't know, like just very rare, I think. So I think that's what makes this whole process for me. I just am like, wow, I don't know why they got into this or how they got into, I don't know all of the what's and where's and stuff, but I'm very thankful. It's just a very rare finding, I think. So if I was funding this, I would keep funding. It's like you have at least two. I know there's, I think, another person, very specialized people who are, their skills are being used very directly, and the skills they have are very much perfect for the situation. So I just want to share my gratitude for that. It's saved me a lot of suffering, and I know everyone else too. And I think it's part of that revision process we keep talking about, but it's like so important. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna emphasize the revision process too, because I've never written an essay like that in my life, not even for school. Never took that long to write an essay ever. And they really were there the whole time, especially Lenore. Lenore really helped me out. Like I said, she was my safe haven. Like, she made my heart stop pumping on my chest anytime I got nervous or scared. And that revision process it was a mean one. It was mean. Every time they would say, we need more. It's like, I don't even know what else to say. Which, like, she would be like, how did your stomach feel? Did you have a churning feeling in your stomach? Like, I don't know. It was a hard process, yeah.
Well, and I just want to give all of you credit. It's not easy, and you all stuck with us. You dug so deep into your hearts and souls, and it was all there. It just needed to be told, and so the stamina, and I'm just grateful that you hung in there with us. And because it does, when you do that written work, it makes the rest of the process so much easier. And you may never realize that because you've done such a great job on your written applications. I'm sorry, we have many more questions and we're running out of time.
Right. As is always the case in something like this, there's way more to say than we have time for.
I just want to say that I'm hearing all these appreciations from you all, but for Steve and me and Kendra, I mean, this is the heart and soul of what we are here to do. You all have inspired us. Each one of you in your own way has inspired us deeply, and it's such an honor to walk this path with you and to be able to accompany you in this work. So I feel so full of gratitude for being able to do this work with you, and I appreciate your courage. You have stood up in ways that I have never had to stand up, and it's really it has a huge impact on all of us, and I'm sure it's impacted the people listening to you tonight.
Okay, so I also want to say thanks to, I know there's a lot of people here who, like I said, are donors and supporters and people who do different jobs, volunteer things to keep all this going. We appreciate it so much, and it's a big part of what, helps people like the panelists here and the other people we work with just get to the place they need to get to. So we appreciate that so much. And other people just even who tuned in to listen here, thanks so much for your interest and being open to hearing this. I think if nothing else, just people finding out more about it is part of changing things. You've probably heard people already say here they had to dig a bit before they even knew conscientious objection was an option out there. So widening awareness of that is a great thing.
Anybody have any final words they're dying to say? I think we really appreciate you all so much.
I'd just like to say it took me 3 years of thinking about this stuff and feeling bad about being in the Army before someone told me that it was okay to leave the Army. And since I reached out to GI Rights Hotline and Quaker House, that's multiplied tenfold, 1,000-fold of the people who support me and are helping me out. And I can't see all of you, but I really appreciate it. And I thank you for coming and hearing us out. And it means a lot to me.
Okay, and we will try somehow to keep everyone posted on, I know Alyssa's already out, but we'll try to let you all know what happens for the rest of our panel on their way to discharge.
We have a lot of confidence that it's going to go well for all of you.
Yeah, we're pretty sure it's going to be an approval for everybody. It's a matter of when.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
So thank you, and thank you to our panelists again for sharing your stories. I can't tell you, I work with this stuff every day, and I still can't tell you how much of an impact it made on me. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night.